Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Stop, Look, and Listen. I'm your host, LeTroy Gardner. This week, we have the CEO of Kemp Solutions. He's a highly decorated 33-year Navy veteran. He's also a coach and an author. We have the Honorable Raymond Kemp Sr. on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here with you.
All right. Yeah, first off, man, thank you for your service.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think sometimes people wonder if that's just lip service, but I really do appreciate it when people say that there were times, and I know this is the beginning of the podcast, but there were times when I did 11 combat deployments. So there were occasions where I thought to myself, is this even worth it? And when I hear people say thank you, sometimes it makes me realize that those hard times definitely were worth it because people appreciate what they have, even though they don't understand what I fully went through. So I appreciate you saying that. I mean that.
All right. Well, let's find out, what you went through. Like, just give us a biographical snapshot into those days, the life and times of Honorable Raymond Kemp Sr.
So the 33 years on active duty, it's more like a water molecule than a true snapshot or even a wave top for that matter. But I joined the Navy back in the 1900s, 1986, and it's a very different time, very similar, regrettably, to these times that we are in now, with a bit of a high cuff social unrest that we're experiencing now. In those days, only 15, 20 years outside of the well-known, depending on what state you live in, well-known civil rights era, we're still experiencing that a high level of discrimination in the Navy, and that's when I joined. So when I started, it was pretty tough. There's a word, LeTroy, that in your lifetime has very likely been so polarizing that we don't even say the word anymore. That word used between different races is so polarizing that now we just say the first letter of the word, the N word, as it were. Mm-hmm. When I joined the Navy, that was not, there was no shroud, no covering over this word that's too, disrespectful to say. That word was just flung around openly. And so in a organization at the time, which had a pretty large population for the majority of my career, I mean, that was my experience, being looked upon and treated as if I was less than the other groups. And so to work twice as hard for half the credit being underappreciated, and the expectations just being very inferior, then what I found was a place to go hard in the paint, to use the modern language, and just work hard and see what happens. So I served on multiple different ships, shore duty. One thing that seems interesting to me is that I've had the opportunity to visit every inhabited continent, the East Coast and the West Coast of those continents. I had the opportunity to meet, or at least be in the room with, if not shake their hands, every president from Ronald Reagan to President Obama, which was fun. And the times at sea, so what happens in the Navy, you get stationed on board a ship that might go out and do combat deployments. And I did that on a number of different occasions, 69 months at a time. And that's, those are the wave tops. Started super hard and then ended at the top, because the Fleet Master Chief position, I'll say this and I'll just come up for air. The Fleet Master Chief position would be, for a corporate person, if you think about the human resource officer, the chief technical officer, and the chief operating officer being combined into one person. That was what a Fleet Master Chief does. And I was the first Black person to hold that position for the naval forces in Europe and in Africa. So that's about 60,000 people.
Okay. All right. So, like, what kept you motivated during those uphill battles, like facing the racial discrimination? You mentioned you started in 1986, around the time when Martin Luther King's birthday was recognized as a national holiday. I think I was in like kindergarten at that time, and Arizona was a little bit later in the game. But yeah, just talk about what motivated you to push forward.
Sure. What happened for me is as a young man, I was raised by some fierce angels. I had a single mom, only child, and six aunts and a grandmother. And I had a couple uncles, who married into the family later. Um, my mother told me as I attended a school on the west side of Oklahoma City, and again, I'm from an era where the west side was very, very white. The east side, where I later grew up, was very black. And so on the west side of
Hmm.
town, I my mother would tell me, "Man, you're as smart as any of them other kids. You just need to focus, study hard, pay attention, and so forth." My grandmother, she saw something in me that most people didn't. She said, "You have the ability to pay attention that is amazing for a little boy." And those two things resonated, in my mind. Those two seeds, planted and grew into redwood trees in my life. And so I always felt that I was as good as anyone else if I applied myself. And I also felt that I could be competitive with anyone, given that all circumstances are equal. And then I knew that I had a bit of an advantage. I would call it a superpower. I have ADHD. And so my ability to focus on a number of things or pay attention to a number of things at one time and kind of see patterns within there, which is what I really understood my grandmother to have said, created space for me to be successful. And so the way I stayed motivated in the face of just obnoxious maltreatment was realizing that you can say those words if you want to. You can do those things if you want to, but mess around and let me get a fair shot. I'm going to
Yeah.
run through this thing and you run through troops and jump over walls and stand at the top.
Uh huh.
Is how I truly, truly believed and felt. There's a rhyme. I don't know if it's still relevant in this era, but as a kid, we used to say, again, I was born in the great nation of Texas, raised in Oklahoma. We used to say, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And so in my mind, I mean, I just live that out. You say what you want. I mean, if you raise your hand, you're going to get these hands. That's not what you want. But if
Hmm.
you give me a shot, it's on.
Right. All right. Cool. So, did you always envision as a kid like Navy or the military as your path as an adult?
The I did at a certain age. So
Hmm.
my I had an uncle who, again, born in the '60s, raised in the '70s. Stress and high blood pressure was coming into my hearing and my understanding through the news outlets and newspapers and so forth. Lots of articles about that and how many people in my community suffered from that was odd. All of my aunts would take off and go to work that I live near, I should say it that way, would take off and they would go to work. And I'd be at my cousin's house for the summer, for example. They'd all take off and go to work and they had good jobs and definitely, really smart ladies. Interestingly, now I think about it, they're really smart, but they weren't necessarily happy with their jobs. They'd come home and they would, talk about the job, sometimes complaining, sometimes celebrating, I guess. But in my mind, I was like, I don't want to get up and go someplace. 'Cause I had an uncle who was at home all the time. So I'm kicking it at
Hmm.
my cousin's house and my uncle is there. And he's, boy, going outside and pick up them twigs up underneath that tree and bring in some baby carrots from the garden. I was like, that's the job I want. I mean, we here playing and he's in charge of us. I want that job right there. Later, I found out he
Uh
was
huh.
in the military, so on and so forth. And so that became a pathway that was viable for me. And thankfully, I had some, did pretty decent in school. So I had the opportunity to become what we now call a information systems technician when I first joined.
Uh huh. So like,
I was through
oh, go
20
ahead.
years for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. So like, as far as leadership goes, like who was the model that you pretty much mimicked, or the template that you followed when it came to your leadership style?
Ooh, that's good. So it's really hard for me to say. I mean, I had many different leadership positions, as you can imagine, over 33 years, going from literally one, the bottom, to the number one at the top was quite the journey. If I was to say there was a style that I modeled, I don't know. I wanted to be as impactful and as eloquent as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I wanted for people to know how much I cared about them, very similar to the way Jimmy Carter was when he was the president. People may not have agreed with his policies and so forth, but they knew when they dealt with them how much he cared for them. And then when I look at the modern era, uh, President Barack Obama carried himself in a way where it was acceptable the way I imagine Malcolm X did. When I look at videos of Malcolm X, he had a bit of a swag about himself. President Obama in the same way, and he's very articulate, and he has a high level of reverence for others, and so that's the type of framework that was in my mind when I stood in front of people and began to be the leader.
Mm-hmm. So like, what are the core principles that you feel a leader should embody?
Okay. Oh, that's a good question. So I think that to me, the definition of leader is I just borrow a term, some language from John Maxwell. A leader is a person who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And so when it comes down to getting people to take action, days gone by,
Mm-hmm.
another definition of leadership was getting people to do something that they wouldn't normally do. I think that might have came from the Marines. The
Uh-huh.
thing about combining those four things together, or those two statements together, is the ability to express a level of care for others. And then what I would describe as the ABCs of leadership: attitude, belief, and character. Attitude, of course, determines your altitude. If you believe, you can achieve. And character, look, your character is going to precede you. And so when you create that, build that reputation and express that willingness to help others attain what you have, and perhaps even create more momentum so they can do even greater things than that, are those to me I would describe as the core principles of great leaders: attitude, belief, character, and then expressing a level of care.
Mm-hmm. Okay. During your time in the Navy, you saw major cultural shifts, like such as the "don't ask, don't tell," and the inclusion of women on ships. Like, what role did you play during these times of transition?
Well, it turns out, LeTroy, that I was in leadership from the fourth day in the Navy to my final days, and in my final day in the Navy. In that time frame, I was responsible for someone, their perspective on things, and influencing, their core competencies as well as their professional competencies. And so when women were brought on board ships in combative ships in 1993, I think it was 1993, on aircraft carriers, that is, I was on USS Abraham Lincoln. That was at the time stationed out of Alameda, California, near Oakland. And let me tell you what, that was really, really hard, because there were so many people who just didn't believe that women belonged on ships. The number of people in that era who were, and it seems archaic now, but even then, and I was there, even then it seemed peculiar for me to hear people say women belong in the barefooted and pregnant in the kitchen. That was
Mm-hmm.
the mindset of many leaders. And so when they came on board the ships, it was difficult. And as a leader, my responsibility was to ensure that we understand that people need to be treated with dignity and respect. We understood
Mm-hmm.
it was important that we created an environment of growth for them the same as we had. It was important that we lived out what the Navy likes to call it, used to like to call themselves a meritocracy. And so you give everyone an opportunity to compete and then just see what happens. And so though it was very difficult, fortunately, because of the left, right, lateral limits within the Navy and laws and standards and rules, we can, to some degree, make people behave a certain way in general. Though the order
Right.
was given out, it was still really hard for women. And I would say that my role in that was making it clear to the folks that I had an opportunity to impact what right looks like. So my
Mm-hmm.
behavior was very important, that they saw how I treated the new sailors, the new shipmates that came on board ships, and then that my walk matched my talk. And
Right.
the same thing happened when we had the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We had the establishment of Don't Ask, Don't Tell from President Clinton, then the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell by President Obama. Um, Again, I was more senior. When those things happen, there's thus a greater impact. Your voice is different. Leaders have a impact on people, not just in their behavior, but oftentimes just the words that they say will inspire action for others. And so and critical, that we're intentional about the things that we say. And so for me, through the Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, using the right language, again, back to dignity and respect, and displaying the expectation that I had of others. Oftentimes we say there's another cliche that we should be the change that we want to see. And so that was my responsibility, and I would say opportunity as a leader during those extremely difficult times.
Yeah. I mean, just from your answer, it seems like it was difficult to, I guess, lead not only downward to your cadets, but also above you and laterally. So, like, when you're trying to get fellow leaders or those above you to get out of that archaic mindset, like, how can how did you approach that? How did you approach, making sure that um, they put their personal beliefs aside to do what was best for the common good of everyone?
Sure. So my responsibility and the actions that I took, I think, are aligned. My responsibility is to be able to move the crowd. And so to be able to touch the point of the crew that understood that this is the way of the future and there really is no other way about it. What we had to do, because leadership is omnidirectional, to your point, so that's a great point. Um, what we had to do, so my responsibility was to impact those folks that I had my fingers on. My direct reports would be the language, and then they, continue to do the same thing, outward and downward. So what
Hmm.
ends up happening the in leadership, you have what we describe as culture and climate. Culture is a top-down driven thing. The person or the media department says, "Hey," I think it was Ford. They had a motto that said, "Quality is job one." So quality is going to be blah blah blah. And that was the culture that they set. But the climate is set from the bottom up. So the frontline supervisors, and think about it like this, and for your listeners, the person who comes when you get to work, and if you drive in and your tires, touch that bumper in the parking lot and you get out, or your hand touches the doorknob going into the building, that feeling that you have as you anticipate that first interaction that you have when you walk in that door, that's the climate. And so as a leader, especially a leader in a big organization, it's important to be able to get your hand on the thermostat and turn that climate dial. And so what we did, LeTroy, is we turned that dial. And so I got in touch with that group that was most impactful to those initially coming in, so that we could ensure that we understood the left and right lateral limits, the rules, the new norms that were beginning to happen, and understood them with a high level of clarity. Therefore, when those more senior people would make a misstep or would say something that was out of sorts, we could display and, when necessary, use the words to show our disapproval. And so, a lot of words right there, a lot of words right there. But the way to impact the behavior of the most senior person is through the climate of the organization, which comes from the lion's share of the organization.
Right. Okay. I like that. So just let's talk about your transition of life after the military. Did you prepare in advance for life as a civilian?
I didn't, not as well as I have tried to help my peers who are now also, coming out of the active duty and into the retired ranks. If I had it to do again, I certainly, honestly, if I had to do it again, I might have just stopped at 20. But if I did do if I was giving, myself advice at the, 31 year point of my career, means I had 2 years left, I would have used a lot. I would have used a different strategy. One, let's learn what these resources are once you transition out of the Navy. There's fabulous educational resources there, transitional resources from going to see a psychologist, psychiatrist before you get out, getting the proper, medical things taken care of. That's important. If you're going to get a job, then, hey, here are opportunities to go into the workforce. If you are going to become an entrepreneur, oh man, there's this organization called Bunker Labs, and it is a entrepreneurial incubator for military members or veterans who are looking to start, companies. All of those things, I wish I would have, I wish I would have known before, and would have made the transition a lot easier. Because I'll tell you the truth. Again, as I stated before, 4 days in the Navy to my final day, I was in charge of people, and so once that was over with, and they what we call pipe, blow. It seems like a whistle, but we call it a pipe. So they piped me ashore, and I went ashore for the last time. It was quiet, and it was really, really tricky. But thankfully, I had a really good community around me, community of friends and family, and they took care of me. But it was dastardly the way I did it. I don't want anybody else to make that same mistake. Yeah. So when I talk to my peers and proteges, I'm like, look, my brother, my sister, when you come out, here's when you should start, and here's how you should do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dad served 21 years in the Marine Corps, and
Wow.
After he retired from, he was based in Parris Island, Beaufort, South Carolina, and he wanted to move back home to Alabama, but where my grandmother lives is like rural Alabama, so there's nothing there when it comes to jobs. So it took him like 6 months. My mom and my younger brother and my dad, they were living at my grandmother's house until he could find something at a warehouse working. And that adjustment was difficult on him, on my mother. Just going from having a regimented schedule to like not having to wake up at 4:30 in the morning was an adjustment. So I know everything that you're talking about. I experienced it, as a child of a Marine Corps veteran. So
yeah. I'll tell you what, first of all, I'm thankful for your father's service. The Marine Corps is a extremely noble and honorable group, and not one that's easy to make your way in that very high standard. So for him to have made that transition, or made it through the ranks to be able to do 21 years, that's an absolute big deal. And I'll tell you, for your listeners and those who have the opportunity to see this podcast, if you know a veteran, my highest encouragement would be after the pleasantries are over, encouraging them to use all of the resources, because it's amazing, the resources that are available beyond, the psych help and all those things for those of us who saw combat. It is an opportunity. There's lots of opportunities for to make up for the time that we lost as we were, serving within the military, to kind of even the playing field when it comes to veteran services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll even say, like, do you feel it's the resources are like promoted enough, like in your face, to where these options, like once you do sign those papers to um, leave the military, or is it something that you have to do some digging, investigating for?
Oh yeah, it's definitely, the days of digging for gold. It's real, and I mean, you have to dig, and you don't want to stop 3 feet from glory. I mean, 3 feet from gold. You know what I mean? You need to keep on digging till the dig is done. And so I also think, and it's a bit of a different topic but similar, the military is having a really, really tough time meeting their recruiting goals right now. From my perspective, that is because of what we are advertising. When I joined, I presume probably the same time era, plus or minus 10 or 15, when your dad joined, it was the Navy's not just a job, it's an adventure. And you often heard about all these benefits. You'll travel the world and you get the GI Bill, so they'll pay for your college. And then you can get a VA home loan. You can get a house and all these things. But through the long war, regrettably, what has happened is because so many of those resources are not being made clear, LeTroy, we kind of swung the pendulum too far. And we were talking about help for PTSD and wounded warriors and all of those programs, which are extremely important and we need people to know about them. But unfortunately, what has happened, I believe, for younger people is that that's all they hear. There's so much noise for the disabled veterans associations and so forth that they're not hearing about all of the wonderful things that go along with learning a trade while you are getting paid to do it, and the opportunity to get paid the rest of your life if you can make it to the 20-year mark and so forth. We don't hear about that anymore. And so this is a lot of words again, but no, those things are not amplified as much as they should be for those who are on active duty. And though there are great programs, we can still do a better job at letting people know what those programs are. Just the same as there's opportunity within the military. Of course, it's only one service that walks on water. I think that the Navy and all of the services, it could be the recruiting challenges could be better served if we were advertising all the magnificent things that are within.
Right.
Dr. Todd McLean provides periodontal and dental implant services in 2 convenient locations. They offer over a decade of experience treating patients, and appointments can even be scheduled in the evenings, weekends, or early mornings. Give them a call in Chapel Hill at 919-537-9774 or in Durham at 919-484-8338, or visit them online at gumsandimplants.org.
All right, so tell us about that light bulb moment when Kemp Solutions started to manifest in your brain, and then the actions it took to get it off the ground.
Oh, great question. So in the transition, I was thinking, well, I'm retired. I'm single. The children are grown and gone. And so what am I going to do with myself? I'm going to just travel the world and play golf and have what I want. But the reality is I come from a place where when you have a gift, you're giving that gift to give to others. And so I knew I didn't want to work for anyone else. And so I started Kemp Solutions. The light bulb moment for me came when I realized that speakers, trainers, and those who are able to do some executive level coaching, it could be lucrative. And so it's not a money grab for me, but what I did know is I needed to give my gift of leadership to other people. And so that was a bit of a light bulb moment because I had never thought about being an entrepreneur. And so once that light bulb got hot, man, it was on, as they say, like hot buttered popcorn. So I jumped into Bunker Labs. I got connected to some great VA resources. And the next thing you know, I was able to, there's a group called ACP. It's called it's the American Corporate Partners. And so big organizations like Fortune 500 companies have executives who make themselves available to mentor folks like myself as we're transitioning out of the military. And I got connected to a fabulous ACP mentor, and shucks, we've been on this journey for the last 5 years. Now, it only took me a moment to figure out Kemp Solutions and kind of get going from there, but it has been a great journey.
Mm-hmm. All right. So tell us about the services you provide with Kemp Solutions, and what do you find most rewarding about the work you're doing now?
Sure. So, it's actually very similar to when I was in the Navy. At least the last probably 15, 20 years of my career, I was into leader development and speaking. And that's exactly what Kemp Solutions does. We go into organizations and help them find the high potential members within that organization and make them exemplary leaders so that they can have an impact on the bottom line. We're in a time right now where resilience and loyalty have to really be earned and earned on the front end. And so Kemp Solutions we deliver products, whether it be teaching solutions or coaching or even keynote speaking on topics that are relevant to today's business, and create that environment of loyalty and resilience. I had a conversation with a friend of mine maybe 3 years ago, about leadership in the current era. We were in COVID and so forth, and turned into a book. And so it started with a conversation, and I was like, I got more to say. I'm texting him, and I was like, I got more to say. It turned into an email, and I was like, I've got more to say. It might turn into a book. And so sure enough, just through my passion to help people communicate better, help them understand their why, that has grew Kemp Solutions into the organization that we are today. And again, we are servicing large and small organizations that are looking to have an impact on their attrition rate. They keep employees longer, and then create space for them to grow their organizations through the strength of their employees.
Uh-huh. So what do you see in like these small and large organizations that make it so similar to military life?
Well, the people, people are peopling, and whether you're in uniform with a rigid daily routine, or whether you're in a organization where you have a hybrid workplace and people are working from home, what is common, I should say, is that they're people. And so what we know is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so if you start with the fundamentals of a level of care, create a measure of recognition for the work that's being done, then you can create space for them to be successful. In the book, in chapter 9, I talk about building resilience and the tenets of building resilience. And so when people are able to just click into trust, and trust is going to yield a measure of inclusion. That inclusion will yield collaboration, because once we're communal as people. So when you bring us together, we have a measure of dignity and respect for one another. We trust one another. We're included within the organization. Then it only makes sense that we're going to be willing to collaborate. And then in that collaboration, again, we've been woven together. We can adapt to the changes that might happen, so that adaptability. Then last thing is we're woven together. we're making our way through the challenges and the victories that go along with just living life because we're adaptable, then we grow. And that goes back to that measure of care and trust. When you know that we're all in this thing together and there's a growth opportunity for an individual different than the group, we're still supporting that individual as the group grows. And so that is, and that's what people love about the Navy. You're woven together in the same way I described. And then you have a measure of commitment. So you're clicked in together. And then when one person decides that they don't want to re-enlist, they don't want to recommit their commission, and they end up going off and doing something magnificent, we're still connected to them and celebrating them outside. And that's one thing that I find senior leaders in high-end organizations are looking to keep that connection with the people, because in these days, it's very common for folks to leave for a period and then come back to that organization. And so maintaining a relevant relationship is very important. And that's, again, back to the similarities.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to mention the name of the book, Sailing Towards Success.
So the name of my book is Building Resilience for Hybrid Success. Building Resilience for Hybrid Success. And the subtitle is Anchored in Adaptability, because we've got to be agile and mobile.
Right. Okay. So do you feel like leaders are born, or is something that they can grow towards through experience and training?
There are people who are certainly born with leadership traits. There are some people who are just more charismatic than others. And you can see that in the playpen or in kindergarten. And then there are other leaders who have picked up a level of skill throughout their life and career that they realize, oh, I can use this skill, this trait here in the workplace as well. So people who, and the example would be a person who played, let's just say, soccer, the world's most popular sport. You have a soccer player, a football player who has been a team captain, and they know how to talk to the striker. They know how to talk to the fullback. They know how to talk to the goalie. They know where each of them fit, in the flow of the game. Well, they can take that same level of skill, and that you learn that as a young player. And you can take that same level of skill into the workplace and be a team player in the workplace, therefore a leader. And so I would say that there are absolutely people who are born with fabulous leadership traits. And then, there are some who pick up tools along the way, and they too can lead successfully.
Okay. You was appointed to the American Battle Monuments Commission by President Joseph Biden. How does that role align with your passion for leadership and service?
Oh, it's absolutely in alignment. So the American Battle Monuments Commission, what we have is the opportunity to go to 26 cemeteries and 32 monuments around the world, 17 different countries. And so as from the mindset of a leader, if I have the opportunity to go and visit, and it may be part of a ceremony, there's still going to be an opportunity for me to go and talk to maybe next of kin, or perhaps even to the folks who work in the yard or in the front office there, and communicate the importance that they are with regard to the American Battle Monuments Commission family. And so when it comes down to the next of kin, we can tell stories of the details that we know about their loved ones and others who are on that particular in that particular cemetery. And then to those who are employees, certainly it's easy to let them know how big a role they play in the global commemoration of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And so our responsibility is to ensure that time does not dim the glory of their deeds. It's an honor to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. What do you see when you look in the mirror?
I see a man who has been through his fair share of challenges, and in spite of that is still blessed and is still looking forward to serving other people so that they too can endure and overcome challenges and celebrate at the top.
Okay. Do you learn more from your wins or your losses?
I would say from the losses. There's more of a education. I enjoy the wins way better, um, but the losses is definitely an opportunity for growth and maturity.
Okay. Um, what's something about you that people would find most surprising?
The fact that I love to roller skate. I mean, old school disco ball, bumping sound, getting, shooting the duck and doing all the things on the skating rink. That'd probably be the one thing that people would be most surprised about. Everything else, I think, is kind of common. I fit the normal stereotypes of musclehead, former sailor. But what
Uh-huh.
catches people off guard is when I get them skates on. Watch out.
Cool. Um, like today's landscape, it's a lot of division, and obviously politics plays a role in it. I feel like social media, um, human rights, like there's just so much going on that causes division.
Mm.
Um, how does Kemp Solutions kind of deal with all of this when it comes to like your speaking engagements and just the work you're doing out in the community?
Sure. One of the things that I think will solve some of the hubbub that's going on is when we are able to truly listen for understanding to one another. I think a great example that we had recently was during the vice presidential debate. It was a debate from days gone by. In our memories, and oftentimes we seduce ourselves with our memory, and our memory is a little shaky. But what I vividly remember is that people used to shake hands and they would walk away saying, "That was a pretty good point."
Hmm.
And that was and I don't know if it was likely very performative to some degree, but whether it's performative or not, that was a good example. Let's share ideas. The book says, let us come one to another and reason together. And so the opportunity to do that is I think is a way to change the world. And so what we do as whether it be in a teaching environment, coaching or speaking environment, and the things that we write, it is about listening to the other side listening for understanding, respecting, their perspective, though it may be vastly different than ours, and then looking for, a common ground, or at least approaching a common ground. We may not always be able to meet in the middle, but we can find a place to be agreeable and not disagreeable.
Hmm. All right. You also mentioned something on your LinkedIn page recently about curiosity. How does
Yes.
how does curiosity come into play in the leadership world?
Well, I think we should always be curious. There are um, many challenges that are before us. There are many, many, many things to celebrate and worth celebrating. But what are we curious about? How can we make things better? Someone in our organization has a propensity for, I think there might be a better way. There's
Hmm.
someone who might be seeking, hey, this is working in a way we could have never imagined. And then somebody else going, and I think we could do it, make this adjustment. I think that when
Right.
it comes to leadership, that measure of curiosity should go beyond just the gadgets that we're working on or the product for our outward stakeholders. That curiosity should also go towards the people. And especially on Fridays, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I like talking about doing something for rest and relaxation. Do something fun. This in I think it's 2 weeks. There's a go kart track not too far from here with go karts that go like 60 miles an hour. I can't wait to get my helmet and get back out there and race. But I want to be curious about my team what is it that you do on the weekends? Is it fun? Are you taking the time to get that rest and relaxation, rejuvenate your mind, because our intellectual posture it also needs a refresh every now and then. And then Monday is my absolute favorite day of the week, LeTroy. Not just because it's leg day, and I got little legs, but they strong. Not just because, and I like legs because it's super hard and most people don't. So I like the discipline of doing legs. But I've also had 2 days off to prepare for this day. It is outside my mind when I hear people say they hate Mondays. I'm like, you had 2 days to get ready. What have you been doing? It's Monday. 2 days, mostly 2 days to prepare, and you're complaining. I don't understand. And so when it comes down to staying curious, how do I tap into that person so that they love the Monday? How do I tap into that person to ensure that they're getting that rest and relaxation? Because if and when they are, then it has a positive impact, not only on the workplace, but also on their home environment. So no matter what that structure is when they're outside of the building, if that is solid, then it supports what's happening within the building. And so that curiosity from, the techno gadget widgets that we're working on, as well as people particularly, is very important.
Okay. Out of curiosity, if Monday is your favorite day of the week, what's your least favorite day of the week?
Every day's Monday. I got a plan. And what's interesting, to the person that complains, every day is Monday. To the person like me who's touching the ceiling every day is Monday.
Yeah.
That's
all right. I love that perspective. Yeah. What's next for you?
The finding more opportunities to speak and train. My greatest desire would be to speak 4 or 5 times a month in person. The last in September, or in October, I was probably face to face with around 6,000. We don't have the number exactly yet, but around 6,000 people. 2 really big groups in San Diego and in Jacksonville, Florida, and that is my get down right there. I love being amongst people. To me, a high level of success happens when I'm able to share a better way with other people by challenging the status quo. And the place I like to do that is in-person speaking events. And so to me, that's what the future looks like. That's what I'm focused on, seeking those events, the opportunity to go into companies. And then all the groups don't have to be, the 25, 3,000 number that I've seen in the past. It could very easily be a 10 or 15, small, C-suite group that is just looking for a different strategy when it comes to communicating excellence to their team.
Okay. All right. So where can these companies find you and reach out for your services?
Sure. So the best place to validate who I am and my perspective is through LinkedIn, as you brought that up. So if they search for Raymond Kemp Sr. on LinkedIn, retired Fleet Master Chief, they'll find me there. I've got a webpage, which is kemp-solutions.com. Again, that's kemp-solutions.com. And there are places there to get a hold of me, or you can just send me a direct message via LinkedIn, and that would be the great start to an impactful interaction.
Okay. All right. So parting shot for you. MLK had a dream. What's yours?
My dream is to change the world from the workplace outward, meaning that in the workplace, that person is treated with a high level of dignity and respect and honor, reverence. When that happens, studies show they behave that way at home. And when they behave that way at home, they behave that way in the community, and we change the world.
All right. The Honorable Raymond Kemp Sr. Thank you for your time, sir.
It's been a pleasure. Continue.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was just going to encourage you and your listeners to remember those 10 two-letter words. If it is to be, it is up to me, and we can make the change.
All right. I love it. Happy Veterans Day, sir.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right. And for Stop, Look, and Listen, I'm your host, LeTroy Gardner. See you next week. Peace and blessings.